Mr. Speaker.
Pene Henaro.
Tēnā koe, Mr. Speaker, and thank you. I relish the opportunity to rise and take a short call on the Christian Churches New Zealand Property Trust Board Empowering Bill. Members across the House have spoken well on the bill. They've detailed the history. And can I echo the sentiment of thanks towards the sponsor of the bill and, of course, the Select Committee who heard all of the two submissions on the bill. What I like and what I sense from the discussions in the House today on the bill, Mr. Speaker, is the collaborative nature of this particular entity. We know that they come from the Christian background, but if I can take us back to 1814 and the beginning of the Christian faith here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, when in the Bay of Islands, the first sermon given by Marsden, Te Mātinga in the Bay of Islands, and it's neat to see that despite the differences between the churches that transpired post-1814 to the signing of the Treaty of Waitangi, we see pretty quickly after the signing in 1840 that this particular organisation has come together because they see the sense in working together on particular issues. Now, if one of those is to simply join up the property that the churches hold, I think that's a good thing. And if there's one thing I'd like to offer here today, sir, is I hope that some of the other churches who aren't, or maybe are in part a part of this particular group, but those who aren't, maybe they'd like to consider that collaborative approach and some of the dealings they have with the properties that they currently hold. And I want to point the finger in this instance, Mr. Speaker, towards the churches that administer the Māori schools. We know that the Māori schools are struggling, and I've said for a long time now that I think it's now time for the church to actually work collaboratively with these schools to make sure that they get the best use out of their assets, which this particular bill is hoping to do with this group, and also the best educational outcomes for Māori and for the students of those schools. So I want to applaud the approach by this particular group. I also see in this bill, Mr. Speaker, a very pragmatic approach. It's already been spoken about in the House, how the original legislation provided too small a scope for the Trust to move forward. And now this particular bill will allow that scope to broaden out and empower them to run their social agenda. Something that we have already heard in this House today, that the church is heavily involved in our communities, and in particular the Great Electric of Tāmaki Makaurau, of which I've been fortunate to work alongside some of the churches, and it's amazing to see the good work that they do. Because it's not an easy thing to do, Mr. Speaker, in my opinion, to change legislation just willy-nilly like this, to make sure that the powers of this particular organisation gain a broader scope in their social agenda. It's something that Parliament, I'm sure, doesn't do lightly, which is why I'm at ease that it went through a robust process in the Select Committee, that the submissions given were heard, and they've already spoken about them in the House today. So moving forward, we look forward to seeing the social outcomes from the social agenda that this bill will empower the group to do. I'm sure all members across the House will endeavour to support it where they can, to make sure that Christian New Zealanders, and indeed all New Zealanders across the country, will gain from that social agenda. It's sensible, it's pragmatic. It clearly has the support of members from across the House, Mr. Speaker, and I don't want to go on too much longer because it's been well canvassed. I hope, though, that the sermons and the services in the many churches across the country certainly have a bit more vigour and a bit more life to the debate that's happened currently on this particular bill. It's been a little bit hard hearing everyone drag out every single word that you see in the particular papers in front of us. But what I do want to just finish on, Mr. Speaker, is how excited I am to see the scope of the social work that I hope that they will be able to do to benefit all New Zealanders. The bill, as I've already said, is pragmatic. It'll be the job of politicians and indeed this House to make sure that that particular agenda is fulfilled, because as I've already mentioned, it's not very likely or too common that we change legislation like this just at the whim of a particular group, and we want to make sure that they fulfil their particular part of the process, and making sure that this empowering bill will allow them to do that moving forward. So in closing, Mr. Speaker, I stand on behalf of the Labour Party and offer our support to this bill. Kia ora.